All right, again, welcome to SOAL Night Live number 21. My guest tonight is Dave Kerzner. And without further ado, here is Dave, all the way from windy Florida. Hey, Dave.
Hey.
How's it going?
Good, man. All right, we got this to work.
Yeah, it works. That was pretty
Awesome.
famous, right? Yeah.
Well, sort of. It was weird. I was clicking the link and then it wasn't taking me here anyway. I'm here. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. It's an interesting time,
Yes, it is.
More free time than I probably need, but I'm trying to keep busy.
Yeah, I'm always busy anyway.
Yeah, I found that, with a lot of folks I've been chatting with, it's like, well, this is good. I've got time to work on music more than ever. So, it's got its pros and cons. Definitely.
Yeah. I'm used to being in isolation in the studio anyway, just working, and it takes a long time to make records and, edit and mix and do all that kind of stuff. So it's, it's been okay from that standpoint. I miss obviously, basic getting together and doing all that kind of stuff, concerts and, seeing my friends but, just gotta, I'm patient.
I hear you. I pretty much haven't done a whole lot or left the house much. I actually went to a live show for the first time since all this started last week. But it was outside and very well spaced out. Yeah, and that felt like about the only safe way to do it right now.
Yeah, like a Prog day.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like it's a shame they had to cancel that. I mean, I understand why they did, but that's like the one festival where you could almost feel safe being at it. So who knows? Maybe next year. I'm trying to remember when did you guys play over there at Prog Day? Was it a couple of years ago now?
Yeah, I guess 2016 maybe 2015, somewhere in there.
Oh, I got a question in the chat. I don't know. I'll only mention what I mentioned recently. Mark Lewis is wondering if we have any information on Yes working on new music. I believe that I read that they have been bouncing some demos back and forth between each other, and they have about a half an album's worth of stuff done, but it's still just in the demo phase. So, that's more than we knew a couple weeks ago when we chatted with Billy. So, so there you go, Mark. I hope that's helpful. Sounds like something's cooking eventually. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. So tell me, how have you been spending your days lately? Besides the mixing?
Well, today I spent part of the day going to Home Depot and getting something to seal the door of my studio. I have a separate studio, and I made a home studio here during the pandemic, but my regular studio is in a commercial building, and it's fine. It'll hold up fine, except for this one thing, which is the front door. It doesn't do well with sideways rain, like when it's blowing. Weird. The rain, wind and rain coming sideways can kind of get through it. And I sealed it myself, which I'm really proud of because I'm not very handy, but I figured it out, or someone gave me a tip first, and I've done it before, but it sort of makes the door kind of, I don't know, difficult to close, but it's safe. I feel good. My equipment is not going to get water on it and stuff, but we're about to have a hurricane supposedly here in South Florida, but I hear the wind now in the back, but it should be all right. I think it'll, we've been through them before, and this one I think is going to miss, and it'll just be some storms. And not a big deal.
That's good. Well, your power's on for now, so
yeah,
we're good to go for this evening anyway. So, yeah, man. So I thought we'd just kind of go back and kind of talk about your career and kind of go over the different groups that you've been in, and but kind of start with some of your earliest musical memories. I usually mention that on each show about, what are some of your favorite records before you can even go buy one of your own, like stuff you might have heard around the house. Or
is this now? Because I actually brought out 10 CDs. I wasn't sure.
Well, maybe, I guess it's all kind of tied together. So I suppose we could just kind of go that route. If Do any of those go back that far?
To the earliest? No, well, strangely enough, the very first records I ever had were very strange. I'm not sure if this was the actual first one, but I got a record player that was like one of those built-in record player stereo systems, and along with some records that I didn't pick out. And one of them was Sgt. Pepper's, but the Bee Gees version
Oh, okay.
with Peter Frampton. And like, okay. And The Long Run by Eagles. And then the first one I actually bought was Boston, Don't Look Back.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
And then, you know, I got Styx, Pieces of Eight, and Boston's first record. And then there's only I had two siblings in my family, my younger brother and myself. So there was a kid named Brian down the street who was like an older brother, and he had everything, and he taught me everything. He was like, all right, here's Led Zeppelin. All right, here's Genesis. Here's Queen. Here's, you know, explain the whole thing. And he had a huge record collection. So that's where I got my education, him and this guy, Mike. And we just, you know, but the thing is that like, then this was like when I was around 11, somewhere in there. When I was in 12, but like when I turned, and I played piano, but just kind of, you know, like learning piano lessons and stuff. And then eventually, you know, noodling around and writing my own, you know, songs with my own compositions of 3 chords over and over for an hour. And then, but I decided from there that I wanted to be in a band and play keyboards probably because of Tony Banks and Jeff Downs, drama, and, you know, like early 80s, 1980, like right around there in 81. I just saw keyboard players have lots of keyboards around them. And I thought, well, you could do anything, any kind of sound. So that's, you know, and I play piano. So it just seemed like the natural thing. So, yeah. So okay. I did that.
Well, you know, that was a great time to be coming up and interested in keyboards because there was so many, you know,
yeah.
I mean, it was the dominant sound there for I'd say the first half of that decade. And I'd say in some ways, that was the better half of that decade. You know, looking back on all the songs that came out of it, I think some of the best stuff came from the first half of it.
It was a good time also because it was exciting. Everything was new and developing. Whereas now, even the company that I work with, my own company, Sonic Reality and IK Multimedia, it's like participates in the virtual world of making music in the computer, plugins and all that kind of stuff, virtual instruments. And before that, I, you know, created sounds for Yamaha and Roland and Alesis but, you know, so for the past however many decades that's been for those kind of digital instruments, it's been omnipotent in terms of sounds. But before that, each instrument could do one particular thing. Like if it was a clavinet, it was a clavinet and that's it. If it was a Rhodes, it was a Rhodes. And then it was like, well, there's a monophonic synthesizer, a synthesizer. You know, like the early synthesizers actually, like an ARP Odyssey, came with a book this thick on synthesis, thinking like you need to really, you know, it's like you just need to play. And then of course polyphonic synthesizers, the Prophet 5, and all the different ones, and then MIDI. And I just remember as a kid there was a store called Ace Music here in Miami. Incredible store, and it was like going to Disneyland for a musician, you know, for a keyboard player, because it was like, what do they have? And they were so expensive that to be able to play a Prophet 10, you know, you'll never own one. I mean, eventually I did, but like, you know, as a kid, I was like, they'd have to peel me away from it. Like, okay, kid, you've had enough, you know, but it's not nearly as exciting to go to a music store now, but back then it was a big treat, you know, it was like an event.
It was like Disneyland.
Yeah.
Only more expensive.
Yeah.
I was trying to remember what you said. What album did you mention before The Long Run? You mentioned
Sgt. Pepper, the Bee Gees version.
That's right. You know, I bought the movie just to see how awful it was a year or two ago, and I actually was impressed with the playing on the soundtrack. You know, it's like late 70s kind of disco influenced Beatles classics. So there's just this killer funk bass all over everything. And I don't even know who that guy was, but he's amazing. So, you know, as cheesy as it is, you know, it's got some great playing on it for sure.
Well, that was the thing about dance music back then, the 70s. At the very least, you know, before it got electronic, you really had to be able to play pretty tight, you know, and the drummers had to have like a good clock, you know, good pocket. And so, you know, even if the music, let's say, was cheesy then or is cheesy now to a certain extent, or it's, you know, it's got, you know, whatever, dated sound to it and all that. But yeah, you can appreciate the musicianship. A lot of great musicians played on those classic disco tracks. Ed Green, who played with Steely Dan, played, you know, on some of those. And, you know, yeah, I mean, I kind of like disco in a way.
Yeah, I really didn't mind it, you know. And in hindsight, you know, it's like even the silly stuff in the 70s had great playing on it, great tones. You know, it was kind of from an era before anything questionable came along, you know. It was pretty simple, you know, Rhodes, clavinet, Hammond, you know.
Well, yeah, you can't go wrong kind of with those instruments too. That was one of the cool things about the keyboard instruments, especially, yeah, and guitar and bass. But the pedals that you bought for guitar and bass, the amps mostly, the keyboards that were available, like you said, a Rhodes, you know, or a Wurlitzer, or a Hammond organ, or a piano. Those are all still great sounds. They're like classic sounds that to me don't go out of style. But as soon as the digital keyboards started coming in, then they started to really be like dated. Like, I never want to hear that sound again. That electric piano sound from the DX7 or whatever, you know, like
Rhodes.
Yeah. So you could, you know, it's those records sound fantastic still today, whereas some records made in the 80s to me don't, because the instruments don't hold up, you know. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting when they went from monophonic to polyphonic also, some of the synths, you know, like towards the late 70s. It's like, you know, an album like, say, Tormato from Yes, or Monolith from Kansas. They're like coated in these new polyphonic board sounds. And in hindsight, I don't think they aged very well, but they definitely gave those albums a unique sound that's unlike any other records in their discography.
I think that, you know, it's all in how you use them, because the polymode, for example, is great for playing string pads and stuff. It's not great for leads. So why Rick Wakeman tried to do leads on it, I don't know. I guess he was bored and wanted to try something new. But, you know, the Mini Moog, I mean, it doesn't get any better than Close to the Edge, you know, Mini Moog solos and stuff. It cuts through. It's great. It's still great, the Mini Moog. But the Polymode is just not good for leads. But it's great on Gary Newman's Cars or Many Too Many from Genesis. It's a nice, you know, pad. So I think it's in how it's used as well, the polyphonic stuff. But like, you know, because the monophonics were still really good for lead. The Quadra, the ARP Quadra that Tony used, was different because it had a poly synth in it, but it was like 4 different synths in one, and it had a nice little monophonic synth or duophonic, whatever, same thing, in terms of like having a beefy oscillator or 2 oscillators that you can do a lead with. So that was good. But anyway, you know, but from there, after that, the real culprit, I think, was like when digital keyboards had presets and stuff, and then you recognize the presets, and then they were on everything. And one of the actually I had a cool conversation with Tony Banks about this, where even his old ARP, one of his old ARPs with a lot of his famous sounds, also had presets. It was called the Pro Soloist.
Right.
And not a lot of people know about that. But, and he laughed because I'm like, you know, it sounded like you were an amazing sound designer, but I know those presets that you used. He's like, I know. And, but the thing is that those presets on an analog synth like that were actually fantastic. They're killer. And whereas the presets on like some of his Roland and Korg synths, to me, are like, generic. It's a different thing. And not to mention, on the Pro Soloist, only certain people even use that keyboard. It wasn't it wasn't like a Minimo. It wasn't as popular. Only like Joe Zawinul and Patrick Moraz used it on Relayer a little bit, and the Grateful Dead used it on Terrapin Station. It's, and even Steely Dan used it on King of the World, I think.
Okay.
But and it's like wow, 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 wow. It's got some funky little sounds. I love that keyboard.
Now, which albums did Tony use it on?
Tony used that on Selling England by the Pound, The Lamb Lays Down on Broadway, Trick of the Tail, Seconds Out. Probably a little less on Wind and Wuthering, because he started using the ARP 2600, and then there were 3. Started phasing it out, that particular one, because it's a particular, but he's kept using ARPs up until well, like through Abacab and 3 Sides Live, he was still using ARPs. And I think even on the Genesis tour, he was still using it, and then that was it.
Well, it's interesting to see the kind of the changes in gear over the years, you know. Like once that stuff was available, I think, you know, everybody wanted to try it. And I'm sure, you know, I don't know if they were giving it away to big guys like Rick and Tony, you know, like, use this, please, so people see you using it and hear you using it. Do you think it was like that, or do you think it was more like, hey, this is new, I'm going to buy it because it's cutting edge and I'm going to use it on the next record?
Well, actually, I don't think I've ever discussed this, but I know these guys, so I don't want to, like, you know, but point any fingers or be critical. But my opinion as a keyboard player, especially my age, and looking at it from the perspective that I have, which is just at the end of the time of the analog synths and stuff, and then I went backwards, whereas they had gone through the whole thing. So like they had toured with Mellotrons and all that stuff. So to them, there was no romanticizing the Mellotron. This was like, can't wait to get rid of this thing and use a Korg Oasis, you know? Right. And to me, you know, guys like myself and Fernando and everyone else were like, no, don't use the Korg, use the Mellotron, you know? Right. And I also do sampling for different artists, including Tony Banks. And so I've tried to push, you know, he uses our software, the Sample Tank software, and Miroslav Philharmonic and stuff. So I tried to push actually, you know, Mellotron sounds. So why don't you use the Mellotron sounds? He's like, well, I don't really like them. I'm like, what do you mean you don't like them? It's like, well, I don't like the choir. And I'm like, why not? So it always sounded like an organ to me, and I had to run it through like space echoes and all these things to just, you know, volume pedal just to get it to sound like a choir. Get it to sound good. I'm like, I know, and you got it to sound really good. Why not do all that stuff? He's like, I'm not attached to those sounds like you guys are. So to him, the Mellotron was just a means to an end. It was just like, well, if you want strings, realistic strings back then, you want choir, that was the closest way to get it in a real pain in the ass way. Whereas to us now, it's like one of the key, awesome, nostalgic instruments of progressive rock. And it's got a real haunting sound. And we like the degradation of the tape and all the other qualities that they just don't like, because but in all fairness, you know, maybe I wouldn't like it if I toured for 10 years with it and it broke down and it
gave you hell in front of an audience on a regular basis. You probably
so it's easy to say when you're like, oh my God, it's so awesome.
Well, you know, from our perspective, and you know, it's just down to taste and what sounds great. You know, it isn't. There's no baggage attached to any of the sounds for us. I'm sure it's the same with the Hammond. You know, it's like people got sick of dragging a Hammond around. So as soon as they could find something that kind of was in the ballpark, they'd use that. I think Kansas was using some Crew Mars or something, and they were so undependable. They had like a whole, like they'd carry extras just to swap it out in the middle of the show when they shit the bed and stuff. And
to answer your question though, from before, I have a theory, which is that a lot of the keyboard players that played all that stuff may have either felt on their own or gotten pressure from managers or label people or the press or whoever to be modernized, because there was this kind of like shift from the 70s to the 80s with MTV, with, you know, reinventing bands like Yes with 90125, which was successful, and then other bands like, let's say ELP with Love Beach were not successful with that effort,
Right.
in different ways to feel like they had to be modern. And one of the ways the keyboard players felt that they had to be modern, I think, is to get modern keyboards and be like, oh, I'm not gonna use my Hammond. No, that's old. I'm gonna use this new sparkling, thing.
Right.
And it's like, no, that doesn't make it modern. It just makes it bad. Like what makes it modern is a sensibility to the writing and the production, and some of it does, like obviously the production and the sounds on 90125, which is one of my favorite records actually. It was modern at the time. It had samples, it had things, but it also had Fairlight. That's a cooler instrument than, let's say, the generic preset on a D50 or something, a Roland D50. So there were certain emulators. Some sounds were really cool and modern, and then some of them were just kind of sparkly and annoying and don't stand the test of time. Like I don't like the sounds on the Anderson Bruford Wakeman Howe record.
I was going to say, it's almost like I almost find those late 80s sounds more offensive than the late 70s ones.
Definitely. The late 70s ones I like.
Ones all seem a little cheesy, but at least they have some analog heft to them.
Exactly.
And the 90s ones just sound like a bunch of fluffy angel pad kind of shit that.
Fluffy angel pad shit. We don't want that new agey crap.
It's like, okay, you can go play classic Yes songs, but at least bring the proper sounds to play them. Don't play them with this airy-fairy sound and modern shit.
Airy-fairy, exactly.
Yeah.
Now, especially when you're talking about the grit, the rock and roll grit that Rick Wakeman had on Fragile and Close to the Edge. Like, that's rock keyboards, man. That's like, to me, you're hanging with everybody on the same level, because Steve Howe's amazing and Bill Bruford's amazing and Chris Squire's amazing, and John Anderson. So like everyone, each of their instruments sounds mwah. And it's like the keyboards, if he had back then, and he probably would have used it if he had it back then, like airy fairy sounds, it'd just be like, dude, you just ruined the vibe, man. We were rocking here. We were gritty. We were warm and tube and distorting and all this stuff. So, to me, as a keyboard player myself, I like that. I like to be a rock instrument still. It's very easy to be an airy-fairy cheese ball doing little horn stabs and little airy, little...
And your little Zamfir
floaty
stuff. And stuff.
And it's like, dude, this is not rock. I mean, go play your new age music or whatever. Like, if you really want to be in a prog rock band or a rock band, and you want to get like some soul and some grit and some like it. And I'm not, personally, I don't care about, I like nostalgia. I like vintage. I like classic. I'm not worried about, I think, because it's all about how you put it together and the songwriting, the production, and the sum of the parts, that is today, as opposed to going completely retro, which I'm not against. But like on my albums, I do a blend. So it's like some stuff, it's like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If a Hammond works, then use it. Don't worry about it. Like, it's fine. A piano, it does not go out of style. Sometimes that's what is called for. But then other times, you need to kind of like push the envelope and like go further. But like, to me, I'll do that, let's say, with either my own samples or like a Nord, which has built-in effects. And I'll maybe start out with an electric piano. I used to do this with Kevin Gilbert when I played with him, with a real Wurlitzer, and put it through guitar pedals and just start to like morph it into something that you kind of haven't heard. So it's like partially like, well, yeah, it's like a Wurlitzer sound. So it kind of sounds like, it doesn't sound like some sort of, I'm trying to, some new sound from space, from the future, in some digital keyboard. No, it's like, okay, it sounds like something we've heard before, but there's a univibe going on and a wah-wah and a distortion, and he's just, and again, sort of like how a guitar player would achieve a new sound. A guitar player, they don't need to reinvent the wheel either, but they've got different pedals and different things to process their guitar, as opposed to, I'm using a synth guitar, I mean, you could use those too, but you know what I mean? Like to a point, it's like, use the tools. They still work great.
guitar
drum, bass,
choices
guitar.
are the guitar choices are pretty moderate compared to keyboards, where they could sound like anything, you know. So it's like
Yeah.
guitars never really stray too far from the classic sound, you know. Sometimes, you know, the tones change, you know, the quality of distortion, you know, from a really thin, nasally kind of 80s sound to a big, thick, saturated 90s sound, but it's still kind of, you know, it's not a whole lot of options there.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it depends. Over the years, there's been like, let's say, I mean, Steve Hackett, ironically, has pushed the envelope for innovative guitar sounds and things. Andy Summers from the Police,
Oh yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and Fripp, Robert Fripp. And so, you know, but yeah, I mean, generally speaking, yeah, it just starts
It's all
there. It
about
starts with,
affecting that guitar sound, the natural sound, rather than
exactly.
making it sound completely different. You know, and a guitar synth had its day, and it still has its moments. It, you know, it's funny. A lot of guys like myself, it's like lusted after one of those Roland GR whatevers. And then I got it, and it's just like, but I don't want everything in unison with me. You know, it's like it works, but you know, I'll take a real keyboard player any day of the week over using that thing. You know.
I like the early, like GR300, which I have one of those, and a GR500. I also have one of those. It needs to be fixed, but it's cool. The early synths are cool to blend and to do different things. But again, once it gets into like digital MIDI, you know, digital MIDI triggering digital sounds and stuff, it's like, yeah, at that point, I'm like, I'd rather hear a keyboard player, and I don't even want to hear a keyboard player playing those sounds. So I definitely don't want to hear a guitar player playing those sounds.
Exactly, you know, it's
Like an electric sparkly piano from the guitar. I had a guitar player once, a long time ago, do that. And I was like, why? Please don't do that.
right. I hear you. Yeah, so yeah, it's collecting dust, but yeah, I wanted it for years. And it was fun for, you know, 5 minutes, you know, all those little do 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 ba 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 boo bee boo scatty sounds on the Roland and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. That was
But,
fun
you know,
for a hot
everything
minute.
has its place. It's not to say that I have one, actually, a 13-pin guitar controller. And I don't use it, but I have it in case, you know, where I would find that actually really useful is the fact that the 6-string voicing of a guitar can be very interesting. You'll do things on that, especially if you're a good guitar player, I'm not, but, you know, Fernando or whoever I would put that in the hands of, can do, like, let's say, not so much beep bop boop, you know, that kind of stuff, but pads and washes and things like that. And if you trigger the right thing, that's not some generic sound, and you do some sound design, it could be useful, you know.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
again,
I think
sensibility, taste.
yeah,
It's you gotta know what.
kind of the pad swelling up behind a clean chord or whatever. Yeah, that's a nice touch without being kind of tacky.
I'll tell you what I did. I have a very cool pedal. It's a Mellotron pedal.
I have the organ version of that.
It's cool, isn't it?
It is.
So I like this, and I actually use this to good effect with, I did the Prog from Home concert.
Yeah.
Remember that the Prog Report did?
Yeah.
And we did one of my songs, Into the Sun. And I played acoustic guitar on it. And on the album, I played acoustic guitar and, of course, the keyboards. And I was just doing like myself, Fernando, and Durga McBroom. Yeah. And I thought, all right, let me run the acoustic through this, and I'll get a little Mellotron behind me. And it worked. It was great.
Cool. I've dabbled with that one. Speaking of Fernando, he's hanging out in the lobby, so I thought we'd have him come in and chat for a few minutes.
Oh, yeah, bring him in.
Let's see what he's doing. I think he's back out in Cali now. He's down your way not long ago. Mm-hmm. Hey, brother.
I didn't see him, though.
Hi, Dave.
Hey, Fern, what's up, buddy?
All good. How's everything over there in Hurricane Land? You're not going to get hit, right?
I don't think so.
Good.
Hopefully not.
Are they going to rock you like a Herman Cain? I'm sorry.
Oh,
too soon.
That's too soon.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, yeah, too soon.
Yeah.
It's all good. What are you guys up to? What are you guys talking about?
We're talking about the evolution of synth sounds through the 70s and how, you know, you can't beat a good Hammond and a Rhodes and a Worley despite having 1,000 other choices.
You're preaching to the Mellotron choir right now.
Of course. You know, I was just binging Live Aid performances. And because, you know, half of them, nobody ever talks about. And I was like, man, there was like, I wonder if anybody had a Hammond. Only one Hammond. And it was
Really?
Style Council, Paul Weller's band.
Really?
Everybody else, yeah, everybody else was. You know what the most popular keyboard at Live Aid was?
DX7?
No, man, CP70. It seems like everybody had a CP70 with a DX7 on top.
That's cool. Wow. I love that.
They all brought their own gear. Just the thought of having to swap all that out every 20 minutes, man.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, from what I understand, no sound check, 15-minute sets, just bam, bang, bam, bam. And like Paul McCartney came up and sang Let It Be, and he didn't realize why people were booing because everything seemed like it was okay. His mic was off in the mains for the entire first verse. Good time. Yeah, that's the worst.
I've got a couple DVD box sets. It still doesn't have every single performance, but it has most of them.
Led Zeppelin sucked so bad that they said, we don't want you to release the performance on the DVD. We will donate to Africa $1 million so you guys don't include it in the DVD.
Yeah.
Wow.
They were rough. They were rough.
It wasn't very good.
Yeah, and you know, everybody points the finger at Phil Collins. Oh, well, Phil Collins, he was tired. He had just flown in on the Concorde. Really, watching the performance, I think it was Booze and Jimmy Page that was the big issue.
Yeah, Jimmy Page.
That's why they were booing. There was a lot of booze.
I don't know. Guitar. I think he literally pulled that Les out of the case and just plugged it in and went for it. And it's like, dude.
Yeah, he didn't tune. His tuning on that show was rather odd. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great performances, but there's also a lot of like, what the hell moments, like, you know, Thompson Twins doing Revolution by the Beatles with Madonna and Steve
rocked.
No. I would put that in the lower percentile of performances. But that's the thing, when you have like 1,000 acts playing, you know, it's guaranteed that some stuff is gonna stink. But
Queen was good, I guess, right?
Queen was incredible. I mean, but I was reading some articles, but you know, they actually they made sure that they played songs that they could do with no sound check. So they just killed it. And they had a good sound engineer and everything was great. U2 killed it. Hall & Oates killed it. That was really good. They brought out the Temptations. They backed up Mick Jagger and Tina Turner. It was really good. Bryan Adams killed it too. And there was a lot of really cool. Nick Kershaw was cool. But, you know, that's the thing. It's 1985, you know. But Phil Collins comes out and sings Against All Odds with Sting. And then he sang backup on Every Breath You Take with Sting. And it's, you know, it's classic 1985 Phil, you know. But it's cool. He also plays Clapton. But it's all good. But yeah, synths. Synths are fun. Yeah, you know. The evolution of the synthesizer is incredible. I love that story.
Talking about, you know, later when things got to be a little fluffy or cheesy, and it was like, you know, what, you know, the question is kind of why, you know, but then you realize that, you know, they were kind of tired of dragging around a Hammond and a Mellotron or whatever, and it was like, hey, this is new, this is fresh, let's try it. And, you know, only time can put it into perspective. But at the time, it probably seemed, you know, cutting edge and, you know, exciting.
Well, I love the fact that everybody's going back to the old sounds now, and I'm excited to hear good old-fashioned sounds on rock records again. You know,
I have. It's like, it feels like for many years they were with synthesizers. They were trying really hard to emulate the sound of other things. Like there'd be a Hammond patch on your DX7, but it didn't sound like a friggin' Hammond. But like, it seemed, where was the turning point when it comes to things really emulating things well? Was it like when the Nord came along and all these red bolts came along and stuff, or was it? The
thing about the Nord is that I love is that it's kind of like a greatest hits keyboard. Most of the Electros only have 20 sounds tops, and they're all great. One of the things that used to bother me when I started working with synthesizers in high school is that we had like a Roland JV90, and we had an EMU like Proteus rack unit, and it had thousands of sounds. It had everything you would ever want, but you would sit there and you would go through all like 150 sounds of crap to get to the right sound. You know, that's the thing. That's where when sessions got really tedious, was when you would record a MIDI track and then go through every sound and figure out what you want. I kind of like the idea of you have like 15 amazing sounds and you kind of stick to that. Because when you think about it, like all the like greatest synthesizer rock bands, Yes, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Genesis, they actually, for about a good 5 or 6 year run, it was the same 5 or 6 sounds. You know, basically, piano, electric piano, Mellotron strings, Mellotron flute, Mellotron choir, the mini Moog, or in Genesis' case, the ARP Pro Soloist, or in ELP's case, take the big, you know, the big modular. So you had lead sound, and then you had an organ. That's pretty much or clavinet, you know, Rhodes, Wurlitzer, and that was it. You know, that's all you really needed to make a record back then. But then in the 80s, things got crazy when all of a sudden there was bell sounds on everything. Little time, you know.
Right.
I hate that's like the worst. I think the worst combination of sounds to me is the sound of a drum machine and some type of belly like DX7 sound. So basically 1987, you know, and then of course the like samples, you know. You know, no.
Right,
No,
exactly. And how
No.
about you know, the Fender Rhodes seems like it got swapped out for the Yamaha stage piano as soon as it was available.
A
You
perfect,
think, you think a lot of people just kind of used the Rhodes as a necessary evil because they couldn't get a good piano sound on stage, and as soon as they could, they ditched it?
Well, yeah.
Yep.
I mean, perfect example is if you follow Wings. First 5 tours, Paul's playing Maybe I'm Amazed on a Rhodes. And then when they got the real backline and they had, you know, stadium shows with the right sound people, and also the development of something called the, what's that, help and still pickup for the piano. One of the first ever pickups that be able to electrify a piano. And that's when people started really using pianos on stage, like Billy Joel and Elton John. And then the Yamaha Electric Grand was really cool. But for years, like the Rhodes was the main thing. The Rhodes and the Wurlitzer. But mostly the Rhodes and Wurley.
What are some big prog albums that use the Yamaha Electric Grand? Is that like, is Oliver Duke? Is that one for one of them?
Yeah, Dave could totally answer that. He loves the 70.
So Peter Gabriel So.
Yeah.
And Duke, certainly. 3 Sides Live. Abacab, a little bit.
Yeah.
And
say Audio Visions, Kansas.
well, Simple Minds. Oh, Audio Visions did that, yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, Simple Minds was great at Live Aid. They also killed it. Their drummers
were awesome. Yeah.
But yeah, also CP70, UK Rendezvous 602.
Yeah.
Classic CP70 song.
Yeah. Eddie.
And also, like, you know, it's not Prog, but when I think of the CP70, I think of New Year's Day by U2.
Oh, yeah.
That's the CP70 with the delay on. Really, really cool. And then also Gino Vanelli, Brother, which I think the sound was CP70 doubled in stereo.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Hey, I picked up another Gino the other day. I didn't even know that. I didn't even know this one existed. You recognize this one here?
Oh my God, Crazy Life. That outfit's amazing. That album is interesting because they got signed because the Vanelli brothers were like a club duo, and they would perform with Gino playing drums with brushes and singing, with Joe playing a Fender Rhodes and a Univox micro, you know, the one that Dave has, the I guess the
Microcorg.
Microcorg, yeah. And he would play bass on the Microcorg. And Herb Alpert saw them play at some seedy little club in LA, and he's like, "You guys are got to be on my label." And they made that record in one day, and it's basically their club act. It's
This
just
is the first one. The first one they did.
Yeah. And Crazy Life charted. My favorite song on that one is called Sharazod, and it's awesome because it gets super 70s. I mean, it's like It's, you could close your eyes and imagine, you could smell the cigar smoke of like hanging out in some seedy like bar in like Sepulveda somewhere, you know, like it's very 1970s LA.
I'm digging the one called Great Lake Canoe.
Oh, that one's fun.
That's cool. There's
That
some
one's
cool
fun.
electric piano on that one.
Some of the best bass lines ever are Giovanelli on the microphone. So yeah.
So Dave, let's see your stack of top 10 albums.
All right.
See if
This
we
is
have
not
them
easy,
here.
man. All right, so not in any particular order, but
Yeah. Okay.
um,
When did you run across that one originally?
well, let's see. Originally, I guess when I was like 19 or something in college, a friend of mine had turned me on to them, but we were really into it when I played with Kevin Gilbert as well. And actually, this is a little known fact. There's a song. Oh, actually, is it on this one? I don't think it's on this one. It's on the one. Speaking of cigars, it's the one about the businessmen smoke the fat cigars.
Easy Money?
No, not Easy Money. It's
Great Deceiver.
Lament. No, it's before Lament, or is it Lament?
Oh.
Da 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 da. Wait, let's see. Well, anyway,
Yeah.
you know which one I'm talking about. Anyway, that
Yeah.
was going to be on shame. That was going to be on Shaming the True. Believe it or not, he was
No
going to cover
way.
that.
Wow.
Yeah. And so we were listening. I lived with Kevin for a little while, and we were listening to this album a lot and the other ones. Yeah. So, and then moving right along here. A Zeppelin album, House of the Holy. It's my
Hey, you
favorite
can't
record.
put up on Facebook. You're gonna get banned.
Yeah, that's right. You put your
Why?
finger over that
You gotta
butt.
put your finger over the asses.
That's right. Yeah, you know, I tried to feature country life from Roxy Music today. I even covered up the nipples with smiley faces, and it still said no the minute I pushed post. It wouldn't let me do it.
Yeah.
It's like, you squares. Considering all the crap you let go through your filter, you're going to give me a hard time over this.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Huge one, man. I mean, arguably the greatest progressive rock album ever.
Only 3 songs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of like a single.
Yeah.
Would you
Is he
say?
showing anything? We can't hear. I'll cover up his private parts.
Right, there you go. Right.
Also bare chested, but
Yep. Okay. So one from
When
the
I was
Phil
down
era
above
and one from the Peter era.
and 2 from the Peter era.
Oh,
Come
there
on.
you go.
Yeah.
Yes.
I had to, you know. But here's one that's maybe a little underrated, but a great album.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love it. That's my favorite one from them.
Such a great record, Supertramp Crime of the Century.
Yeah.
And then this is my favorite Rush album.
It might be mine too. I think that's
Is it really?
best bass tone on any record is on that one.
It's just so melodic, and you know, I just love this album.
And what keyboards are all over that? Oberheim.
Yeah, the Oberheim OBXA
Was it
and
PP?
Mini Moog.
Oh, cool.
And then, you know, I have to because they're just great, these 2 guys.
Oh, yes, of course.
They're a big influence. That's it. Those are the 10 that I picked. But there's others, you know. I mean, every Genesis album from Trespass to Abacab is up there. Fragile. And I didn't pick this, but I should have because, you know, although the album cover is terrible. But this is such a great record. Magical Mystery Tour. I mean, Blue Jay Way and I'm the Walrus and Fool in the Hell and, you know, Strawberry Fields. And you know, Abbey Road, the album, and Sgt. Pepper, and Revolver. You know, those are like, you know, up there. I'm a big Beatles fan, along with Fern. We're both Beatles fans.
And Alan Parsons had a hand in a lot of those. Are you into his band as well? Some of his albums?
Yeah, I like Turn of a Friendly Card. I like that when I grew up. Yeah, I like all the earlier stuff too. Not all of it, but I really like Eric Wolfson and Alan's Engineering, and they had some, you know, cool singers like Lenny Zakatek and Chris Rainbow and Ian Beardson, all those cool guys. They were great. They definitely had some really cool sounds and orchestration and you know, some of it's a bit poppy and cheesy, some at times a little sappy, but so it's not as like, you know, deep and dark as Pink Floyd, but kind of Floyd light, you know.
Yeah.
So, but I still liked it, you know, and as we were saying too, like a lot of the sounds, you know, that they used were great. So it just had a real warm quality to it, and you know, the orchestration was nice with the, you know, and they were also really creative too. Right around from Turn of a Friendly Card, Eye of the Sky, like around then with the sounds, you know. Also, I love Steely Dan. I know you like them too.
Yeah, we,
you know,
can't get enough. I wish there were more albums. You know, there's only
especially
so much
like
water in that well.
Well, you know, I just recently heard a whole. I know Fernando doesn't like Gaucho, but I love Gaucho. But there's like a whole like bunch of outtakes.
You're right. It was supposed to be a double album, so there's like a whole another album's worth of outtakes, and some of them are cooler than what made the record, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Swapped out a couple songs and maybe like that. You know, there's the famed song, "The Second Arrangement," where they worked on it forever, and then the engineer recorded over the end of it, and had. I bet he got fired instantly. It's like, you know, you go tell him you did it. No, you tell him. You know.
Nobody ever names names. Who was that engineer?
That's a good question, man. He was
Mud. His name is Mud.
And I've heard some demos of that song, and it's not like the most amazing Steely Dan song ever, but it's a really good one.
No, and you know, one of the things that's cool actually that sometimes you get to discover is, and that there's a case there, and there's another case I'll tell you about where some of the outtakes are a bit more like the previous record. So it's like the second arrangement's a bit more Asia, like, you know, which I love that record, such a great record. And Gaucho was more stark. There's the Wendell drum machine thing. It's a bit more sparse and more modernized, more like clean. And one of the things that was great about, of course, Asia and albums before that, Royal Scam and stuff, was there was some grit and some soul and just some kind of, you know, and the drumming was amazing and guitar, you know, tones. And the second arrangement, I think some of the other ones had a little bit of that Asia sound still there. And I think it would have been, I mean, in some ways, it depends how you look at it. In some ways, I could see why it's the record that it is, and it's like a new step. But at the same time, it would have been, you know, if you're a Steely Dan fan, this double album, if they had done it, would have been like, probably Fern would like it better. You know what I mean? Because it's got the bridge to the other. The other one that people may or may not know, but like it's interesting to see some of the early stages of the Genesis album, because and also I guess if you look at the outtakes for Abacab, you see a bit of the Duke. Like you might recall, it's got a little bit of a Duke thing, and me and Virgil and the other one, there was a Paperlight, not so much that one, but the for Genesis, they went sort of more digital, more whatever, hokey and different things. But like the early versions of the musical ideas for Illegal Alien were Abacabby and great, like dum 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 dum, and he was just messing around with the CP70, and then they got rid of the CP70, and they changed out the sounds, and of course in that case wrote this silly song over it. But the actual musical ideas that were that was built off of were like, could have gone in a completely different direction. And it made sense what they did, but I just think like there was a chance that it could have really been more like Abacab, which I love the album Abacab. So more than the Genesis album.
Yeah,
so.
My friend Matthew in chat mentions that tune Submarine. Is that another outtake from right around then?
Love that song. I actually asked, so I'm friends with Nick Davis, their producer engineer, and he mixed Dimension on for Sound of Contact. And he and Jeff Collingham are my connection to Genesis. You know, Jeff's their tech, Tony Banks tech, and Phil Collins tech, and so like the technical guys, the engineer, you know. So through them is how I got to work with them and to meet them and be invited to the studio. And you know, occasionally I'll ask inside questions and stuff. And so I got to see Nick mixing their box set, which was fascinating. Him very quickly having to recreate all the stuff. I thought he did a good job considering how fast he had to do it. And so he did Submarine. And, you know, I had a couple questions. I was like, so I hear like the rolling tom thing, and like that was at the end of Dodo. So was this supposed to be at the end of Dodo? And he said, yeah, I reckon that it would have been. So as part of the Dodo suite, Dodo Lurker Submarine would have been cool. And by the way, Fern, we got to do that on our tribute.
That'd be fun. Yeah.
We should do that. Be great. I love Submarine. We're doing it, Sean. We're doing a tribute to Genesis from the early years up to 1983. Anyway, so that, and then the other thing I said, by the way, kind of sounds like Pink Floyd, you know, Shine on You Crazy Diamond part, whatever, 7 or 8 or something like that, that section. I said, what do you think? You think they were like listening to that? He said, yeah, I reckon they were. Reckon. Okay. He didn't say for sure, but he said, yeah, I think probably they were listening to that and but that's also why it didn't make it maybe on the record. I love that song.
So Dave, tell us how you wound up working with Kevin. And led to that.
It was, I had a friend of mine who I've always had friends who have more, bless you, my cat just sneezed. Chewy. What's up, dude?
Yeah.
All right. He's chilling. Friends who like were musical encyclopedias. Fernando's one of them now. But back then, it was, I had different ones, but like, let's say Mark McCrite from Rocket Scientists. He was a good friend of mine, and Eric Norlander as well. But Mark just collected everything. And he was the guy who would be like, hey, have you heard this? Have you heard this? Have you heard this? You know, we both loved Genesis. We went to Grove School of Music together. Actually, I met him by accident because he was in the studio that I had booked. And then we started talking and discovered we both liked Genesis. Anyway, and he was like, have you heard Kevin Gilbert? Have you heard Toy Matinee and Giraffe? I think even before that, he was like all about Giraffe. And so he gave me a mixtape or whatever, you know, like here's a bunch of stuff you should check out. And then not long after that, out of the blue, Kevin Gilbert called me on the phone because he heard that I had Mellotrons. So I was sort of known in LA for having a lot of vintage keyboards because I was really into it in the 90s, right around the time when people were selling it, getting rid of a mini Moog you could get for $400 in the Recycler. Recycler was this paper that was like bargain trader, like Craigslist in a paper. And in fact, one of the keyboards that I screwed up on, besides M-Frogs, which I have, that was later keyboard, was Gino Vanelli's Chamberlain.
Which you used.
And I screwed up though, but someone else screwed up. I wanted to go in on it with Eric Norlander from Rocket Scientists, the partner of Mark. I don't know why. I should have just bought it myself. It was only $400. And he didn't want to split it because he's like, no, the Chamberlain's not the thing; it's the Mellotron, you know. And I should have bought it, but you win some, you lose some. Anyway, so Kevin called me out of the blue, and he's like, hey, I heard that you have Mellotrons. Could I come by your studio and check it out? I said, yeah, sure. You know, and I knew who he was, you know, and everything. So he came over to my place in LA. I had this studio on top of Mulholland. It was really cool with like a panoramic view and tons of keyboards everywhere. And I was rented out different rooms so I could afford this really nice place. And he came over, and then he saw, like, you know, the RMI, and he saw the ARP, and I played him some of my music, and he saw the Mellotrons. And I didn't even talk about Genesis. He just said, hey, we should get a bunch of guys together and play the Lamp. And I was like, sure, you know, let me know. And then about a couple months later, he called me up and said, do you want to audition for my solo band, Thud? I wasn't even called Thud yet, actually, just my solo band. And I said, sure. He said, well, actually, it's not an audition. You're the only keyboard player, so you pretty much just have the gig. Why don't you just come over? I didn't know any other keyboard players, really. So I was like, cool. And I went over to his studio called Lawnmower and Garden Supplies in Pasadena, and joined his band. And then eventually, you know, he was living in the studio at the time, actually, in his studio. And he needed to get a place. And so when he got a place, I moved out of my place. And we all, another person, Sherry, we all worked together, actually, because we scored TV together under his fake name, Matthew Delgado. And so we were all working together anyway on that stuff. And I was playing in his band. So we got this crazy castle. Actually, this is interesting. We rented a castle in Eagle Rock. Like, it had stained glass windows and a throne in the front, right, but it was an estate, and there was a guest house, and the person staying in the guest house was Ed Green from Steely Dan.
Wow.
I got
Cool.
the news. So yeah, so that's my Kevin. That's how that happened.
Cool.
Okay. So tell us a bit more about playing some of those shows with him.
With Kevin?
Yeah. The first one was the Lamb show, and then after that you did the Thud tour.
No. That was Nick DiVirgilio's first show. There was another lineup before that with Toss Panos, who played with Toy Matinee Live, and he played with Steve Vai and all sorts of other people, and a guitar player named Corky James. And we played like little places. There was a place called Luna Park that we played. We played the Mint. I think Mick Fleetwood was there walking around the Mint. And I met Keith Emerson because we played this horrible little place called the Alligator Lounge. I don't know if that's still there on Pico. It's a little dive bar. And Kevin invited Keith Emerson. And I pulled up in my car, my truck with my Wurlitzer in the back. And I saw Kevin talking to who I thought was Keith Emerson, but I had never met him before. And, you know, and I pulled Kevin aside. I said, is that Keith Emerson? He's like, yeah. I'm like, what's he doing here? He's like, oh, I invited him to the show. I'm like, this show? Like, why, dude? And he's like, whatever. He lives close by. You want to meet him? I'm like, of course I want to meet him. You know, I'm a keyboard player. And so I met him. He was so nice. And he helped me. He offered to help me move my keyboards in. And then he said to me, I'll never forget it. He goes, would it be okay if I could be your roadie for the evening? This is a good story. Keyboard player, like Keith Emerson was my roadie for an evening. He helped me move. I mean, you know, he was totally cool.
Yeah.
So,
as long as the knife didn't end up in your keyboard, right?
What?
As long as a knife didn't end up in your
Well, you
world.
know, I was a little self-conscious that evening, thinking like, geez, like, I mean, there's been a few times where I played some gigs where I knew someone heavy duty was in the audience. That was one. I was like, man, Keith Emerson's watching me right now. I better be good. And another one, fortunately, I did not know he was in the audience till afterwards, was a gig I played with Lily Hayden. I sat in with her at the Viper Room. And then afterwards, I went to talk to her to see how she thought it was. So I was sitting in for the keyboard player that was sick. And she was sitting with Herbie Hancock.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, oh, like, wait a minute. And there was like this jazz section where I improvised and stuff. And my life started going before my eyes. I was like, wait a minute, what did I do? What did I do? Like, was that good? And before I could process the whole thing, he goes, I dug it, man. And I was like, oh, cool, man.
What a relief.
I wouldn't have been as bold doing like pseudo jazz in front of Herbie Hancock if I had known he was in the audience. But it was fun. LA is fun that way.
Yeah,
It used to be.
you never know.
Yeah.
And So that show at the Troubadour is kind of immortalized. What do you remember about that? Anything particularly special about that show, or just another gig?
No, no, that was a very special show. I remember a lot about it. And also, like, we had a crazy party afterwards. Some of these shows, we had some crazy parties afterwards. But some of the stuff I can't talk about. But
Early '90s in LA, I can imagine. So.
oh, you don't even want to know.
Yeah.
But the show was great, and it was a good ripe time for the band. See, what happened is we had done Kashmir, a cover of the Zeppelin song, for Enconium, which was a Atlantic Records tribute to Led Zeppelin with Stone Temple Pilots, and Sheryl Crow was on there, and his old flame.
Maybe.
Yeah, and we were supposed to be on there, but he argued with the A&R guy about him wanting. We were going to be signed to Atlantic, and the guy wanted him to do a duet with Sheryl Crow, and he just won a Grammy with Sheryl, and he was just like, nah. And so they said, well, then it's not on the record. And so we brought it to radio KLOS, Mark and Brian's show, and they were like, can we play it? And we were like, yeah. And so they played it like as an exclusive, and pretty much it was like a bigger hit than anything on the record, at least in LA. And so I remember distinctly the very next show we did was packed. I think it was like Virgin Records. We were just doing the show in the store, and it was packed, and everyone wanted to hear Kashmir. I was like, wow, that's the power of like having a hit on the radio. Like, it's night and day. And the irony is that before that, it wasn't really that well known that Kevin, or that we were doing these gigs, that it was the guy from Toy Matinee. And we only did one Toy Matinee song. I would have done more, and I would have done songs from The Shaming of the True, but we just did Thud, and we just did that. Occasionally a few covers, but we did The Ballad of Jenny Ledge. And after, I remember one time, maybe at the Mint or something like that, someone came up to us like, dude, you did a great cover of that. You sound just like that guy. The guy from Toy Matinee. Like, I am the guy from Toy Matinee. So, but it wasn't, the Troubadour show was great, and that was sort of like in our prime. And then, unfortunately, I left the band because I moved far away, and, I had a few issues with him. In retrospect, they're forgivable, I guess, but like, he had done Back in New York City without me after we had just done The Lamb, and didn't even tell me. And I was like, dude, but he did it with Mike Keneally, and Mike's amazing. So, but still, to not even tell me, not even, like, I was mad. So, I was just offended. And, and a few other things, but, really, but they did some shows as a 3-piece, and I didn't know that. And I felt bad later on. I was like, oh, well, all right. And I had a girlfriend who was kind of like Sheryl Crow at the time as well. And he warned me, and he was right. And I was in the Eels. I was even in the Eels during that time too. I was in 3 bands. And then they were completely in Northridge, and I lived in Santa Monica, and he was in Pasadena. And in LA, it was like, so I couldn't make it to some rehearsals, and then they kicked me out of the Eels before I even had a chance. But it was another situation too, where E from the Eels pretty much played everything. And same thing with Kevin. He played everything. He's a keyboard player. He doesn't really need you to play on the album. And he just needs you to play live. And it was like, I should have just accepted that, but it kind of annoyed me. It was like, dude, I do all these, lug my gear around, do all this stuff. Like, let me play on the records more, and he just didn't need you to do it. So, and neither did E. It was just kind of like another situation where and the parts were great. John Bryan's on that record. My Beloved Monster and Me, that was the previous one. But like, No Came for the Soul. I remember seeing the video too and thinking, shit, I could have been in this video. But, whatever.
No regrets. However, one big regret is the little 25th anniversary concert that we were going to be able to do that COVID-19 destroyed. Tell the story about Troubadour Thud Fest.
Oh, yeah, forgot about that.
What a bummer.
I had arranged a reunion show, which we could still do, but it was 25 years to the day in June or July at the Troubadour, and the Troubadour was okay with it and everything. And I had the same live at the Troubadour people plus Fern. So I had, Nick DiVirgilio, Russ Parrish, who's Satchel from Steel Panther, totally into it. Satnam also on tablas, myself. And then we would have Fern join us on bass. And then the three of us, Russ, myself, and Nick, were going to share the singing. And then we might have had like some friends like Mark Bonilla and some other people who would play with them come up as well. And maybe Corky and Toss, actually, probably. It just was going to be a total celebration of Kevin's music, which, we did do at least. Fern, did you see it, actually? Did you see us do Shaming of the True?
No, but I thought you were going to mention our little tribute that we did at Prog Stock.
Well, yeah, we did a little Kevin Gilbert thing at Prog Stock. That was fun. But that was just us. That was my solo band with Fern and Derek and Andy. But no, in 2012, we did with Nick DiVirgilio singing, Brian McLeod on drums, Paul Ill from Caviar, Stan Cody from Giraffe. And that's where I met Letitia Wolf, who's collaborated in Continuum, and other people. And it was just, and Mark Hornsby put that together. That was cool. So we did all of Shaming of the True. That was a Cal Prog thing in South California. One-off, ton of work, 3 days to learn it.
Wow.
It was crazy.
What were your favorite songs to play from the Shaming?
Well, we never got to play Shaming, even though he had it. Not all done, but a lot of it was, he had already heard it. In fact, I played on one of the songs on the record, number one smash, certified.
It's basically taken from that live Troubadour and then kind of.
No, actually, I don't think it was from the Troubadour. I think that was from South by Southwest.
Oh, okay.
Possibly. And I could be wrong. But which Pat Mastelotto went to visit us because he lived in to see that show from King Crimson. But and I remember actually Pat Mastelotto coming to our old Eagle Rock house to tell me that he got the gig with King Crimson.
Wow.
And at that time, it was shocking because, he was such a nice guy. He still is. And he played with Mr. Mister. But I knew he really liked Kevin's music and he liked Prog. And he had shared with me a Mr. Mister DAT of a Mr. Mister album that wasn't released, that later was released. I think it's called Pull. And it was like a proggy Mr. Mister album that got shelved. And it had some kind of Rendezvous 602 type CP70 and some things like that. And of course, Richard Page sang on Third Matinee. Anyway, so there was a bit of all that kind of stuff. But I remember him saying, yeah, I got the gig with King Crimson. I was like, really? Like, I couldn't believe it. I was just like, wow. Like, Bruford. And then there was that, like, the double, it was the two of them. And I was like,
I saw that tour in '95 at the Sunrise Musical Theater. I was 14 years old and I've never recovered. It was brain explosion. It was incredible. And the sound was great. And, the combination of Mastelotto and Bruford was perfect because Bruford was just laying down most of the time and Mastelotto was being weird. And then when Bruford was weird, it was like, yeah, this is awesome. But when they're both weird together, but the combination of the two was actually really musical and beautiful. And the sound in those shows were just absolutely insane. It was great. It was overwhelming.
Yeah, I mean, there were moments. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was getting some distortion.
I'm getting some distortion. Yeah, I'm not
sure. I think maybe it's Fern's speaker if you turn it down a little bit.
What?
Yeah. So yeah, there's these moments in the 90s, like that moment was pretty priceless that I'll never forget. Pat Mastelotto from Mr. Mister telling me personally, I got the gig with King Crimson, and me just going, really? Like, wow, dude, that's, and so to be witnessing that, of course, and then he played with them, still plays with them now. Another one was I did a session for Sam Phillips with T-Bone Burnett who was very good, by the way. And I was walking down the hall at Ocean Way, and Jack Joseph Puig, the engineer, pulls me inside and says, "Hey, Dave, here, come here. You want to hear something?" And I'm like, "Sure." So I go in the room, and he's like, "I'm mixing or I'm mastering the new Jellyfish record, Spilt Milk."
Oh,
and
yeah.
I'm like, "Oh." He didn't say the name, but it was Spilt Milk. And so here, just listen to the new Jellyfish record. And he played All Is Forgiven super duper loud, like the loudest I've ever heard anything. It was painfully loud, like the threshold of pain. And it was like, "All is for," and it was like, holy shit, like the hair of the, you know, and it totally blew me away. But like to think now, that was it. That was the last Jellyfish record. That was when they were making it. It wasn't like I walked in on the session while they had all the keyboards set up or something. That would have been cool too, but it was just him. And but just to hear it before it even came out, and you know, I like the first Jellyfish record, but to hear like that song, especially to go, "This is the new Jellyfish record," you know, that was just there was a moment, a special moment I'll never forget.
I can
Cool to be
imagine.
there.
That's such an amazing record. And you saw my interview with Roger a few months back.
Yeah,
Where he was
very
talking
cool.
about, you know, being around when it was being mixed and how they had the whole studio to themselves while it was being mixed. And he spent a lot of time in an adjacent studio with like a grand piano, just kind of writing songs that later wound up on his solo albums later. I think they had one where they
You
tried to
mean
write.
not for Spilt Milk? That's
No,
for the
it's
first
more
record.
like just like things that wound up on his first solo record later. There's this tune called "I Wish It Would Rain," which I think he tried to write with Brian Wilson for a hot minute. They had a writing session with Brian Wilson that lasted about 30 minutes, and they're like, "Okay, Brian's got to take a nap. Goodbye," and they never called him back. And he's like, "Well, I'm going to go ahead and use this on one of my songs." And it was very much a very Beach Boys, Brian Wilson-y kind of keyboard part, you know, almost like Sail On Sailor or one of those songs. So cool stuff. So tell us about you two hooking up and you putting your band together. Did that happen around 2014-ish?
No,
I'm trying to remember.
earlier.
It's further back.
2009 or
Okay.
8. And I first met Dave at the offices of a guy named Randy Fuchs, who runs a company called Artist Relations. He basically, his job is to hook up musicians with equipment companies for endorsements. And I showed up for my meeting that was scheduled like at, I don't know, maybe 2 p.m. And Dave was right before me, and his ran late. So I sat around the waiting room for Dave to finish, and Dave comes out. And this is something I remember. I was wearing an ARP Synthesizers t-shirt, and you struck up a conversation because you're like, "ARP, are you a keyboard player?" And I'm like, "No, I'm a guitar player, and I've got this band, Dreaming in Stereo." And I gave him a CD, and I said, "Yeah, I'm really into prog, and I love Genesis and Yes and all this stuff, and you know, check this out." And he listened to the CD and he liked it, and always kept me in mind. Yeah.
Yeah,
cool.
Dreaming in Stereo.
That was fun. And I remember you asking me, "So, all right, let's talk shop. Tell me about your Mellotron. Tell me about your Moog. Tell me about your organ." And I said, "Man, I'm poor. I all I have is a Roland XP50 with the vintage cards." And you started laughing, and you're like, "Oh, no wonder I like the sounds. I came up with a lot of those sounds, or that's a lot of my samples or something." I was using some of his samples before I even met him, you know? Because Dave has a
And
long
then
history
there was a moment I'll never forget. You had stopped by with he who shall not be mentioned, because I'm really mad at him because the guy stole my ARP 2600. So I didn't want to say his name.
Yeah.
That guy.
That guy.
We need
Kanye
to
West.
hunt him down and
We'll just call him Kanye now. No.
So anyway,
he's more like Khan than Ye, though.
Khan.
Khan.
So a mutual ex-friend of ours like brought Fern by, and I had played him Sound of Contact Dimension out before it was released, and he loved it. He freaked out and just was totally like into it and everything. And I think that was around the time actually when you gave me Dreaming in Stereo, your album.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first song we actually worked on was a cover from Signals for my Rush tribute, which I still haven't released. Jesus, but it will be released with Billy Sherwood, which is Digital Man from Signals. I only released the ones that we did from Moving Pictures, but there's a whole bunch that we did from Signals, including Digital Man. And, Billy had sang on it, played bass and guitar, but I wanted to try, leave the bass and the guitar, and I play keys, and Neil Peart's on drums on that. He's on all the Rush songs because I sampled him and I did a session with him for that. And then Fernando just totally went bold and like Steely Dan-ish and just like, what? Like, but great, did a great solo on it. And between listening to his album and the way he responded to Dimensionaut, and I just knew, I don't know, like it just kind of like a brother from another mother kind of thing, like musically, it was just like, this is the guy. And so I started my solo record, New World, in 2014. And that's when I knew, I just like, I'm going to have Fern play on stuff. I didn't realize, though, I thought he played guitar. I didn't realize how great of a bass player he is. So he ended up playing a lot of the bass and guitar because he was too good. I couldn't resist. And also, not just that, like, there's something to this day, and probably like we'll work together forever because there's a certain chemistry. He really genuinely likes my songwriting.
Yeah.
And it inspires him to play. I'm saying it like he's not right here. Let's talk about it. And we speak the same musical language and we're able to talk about it. Plus, Fernando is so used to playing with so many different people. He doesn't have like an ego about it. He really wants to please you. Like, he'll try his thing and it's like, if you don't like it, cool. What do you want? Like, he's got that good balance of confidence. So he's not just like, I don't know, what do you want me to do? Like, tell me. It's like, give me a chart. It's like, no, you don't need a chart. Just give it to him. Let him go. And if you like it, sometimes it's just like a gift that just came from the sky. And then other times it's like, all right, I hope you don't mind. And I never feel really uncomfortable telling him what I need, even if I have to like give him notes that I want to happen in a guitar solo. Some guitar players are really like, I don't want to hear it. And Fern's like, he doesn't like it, but no guitar player does, but he's willing to do it, and if that's necessary, and we just do what it takes to get like this epic end result together. I know I can. And the other thing is he's super fast, like, so, and I get spoiled by it because I'm like, if I give it to another musician, or if someone even gives me something, I'm not that fast. So it's like weeks later, Fern's like, the next day, here you go. He's faster than I can, And I love that though. I'm like, I'll just give it to Fern.
Fresh. I like to do stuff fresh, and there's a certain thing to, a first impression of what a song is, and it's like sometimes the first take or the first 5 takes is the way to go. Before
I totally agree.
Before things get too tedious.
There's, in fact, if anything, I would say one of the things that makes our collaborations work really well is you're a very in the moment, in the zone player and writer, which is great. Although sometimes it's the analytical and the meticulous approach is necessary for certain types of productions and styles, which I like, and that's my forte. So I'll just like capture the magic of you. Let's say first impression, first take, whatever it is, great. And then to me, I'm like, okay, but I'm going to comp this, or I'm going to, rearrange this, or I'm going to do this so that the whole thing is like, maybe the whole track wasn't there, but now that you did that part, I remember when we did Nothing, it was hilarious. My song Nothing, I had sent it to Fern to play on it. And there was a section that I was supposed to sing over, and he had done like, not just a guitar solo, but like 20 guitar tracks. And I'm like, what is this? I'm like, I didn't ask for this. I was even a little mad at him for a second. And he's like, have you listened to it? And I'm like, I think so. And I wasn't listening to all the tracks, and I was missing the key main lead track. So I just heard all these other tracks that were going like, I'm like, what is this? I didn't ask for this. I can't sing over this. And then he's like, all right, listen to it. If you don't like it, no problem. And I don't know how he even said that, because it was so good what he had done to be able to let go of that. Crazy. So I hadn't heard it. So I pulled up all the tracks, and then I heard what he finally did. It was just genius. So much so that I actually changed the structure of the song, because I still wanted to sing my part or whatever, the bridge, to like include that. I gave him songwriting credit. I'm like, you co-wrote the song. I mean, you just created that section. It didn't even have a guitar solo. Now it has a guitar solo. And so that was, like I said, a gift, you know. But then other songs like The Lie, we did it in person, and we kind of, you know, went through a whole bunch of takes, and then together we kind of morphed the keyboard player's idea of melody with your spontaneous stuff, the things that were, you know, that were working for you as you were doing the different takes. And it was kind of like coming together. So either way, between, I think the way that you think and play and the way I think and play are very compatible to get a great end result.
It's awesome, man. It's great working with you, and we've made some great records, and I'm looking forward to making lots more, man. And we've got lots of things in the pipeline, so, you know, never a shortage of music coming out of us too. So it's all good.
Well, one of them, by the way, Sean, is a project, a completely different approach, which it's called Squids Out to Sea. And it's something I approached Fernando about, because as you know, he's done those instrumental records, the Out to Sea, volume 1 through 3, and he did another record called Zebra Crossing. And I just said, I hear vocal melodies and lyrics over these songs. Would you mind if I wrote to them? And so we made this whole other project where 90% of the instruments are actually played by Fernando, even the keyboards. And then maybe I'll add some keyboards if I hear something like we did on the song we released. But my main job is to write lyrics and sing. So that's a fun project, because it's allows me to, like, I'm working with his ideas, his compositions, his musical beds. And it's like all about what inspires me. And I have to say, from that standpoint, it's a very similar thing, Fern. You haven't even heard it all yet. But a lot of my ideas, my ideas are exactly that kind of initial, what do I hear over this? And then I'll sing it into like a voice recorder. And I've only honed it over time, and I just haven't finished the lyrics, but the melodies are all there. The songs are all there in my head. As I listen to it, the whole album's there. You haven't heard it, but it's I've got it. And
great.
It's, you know, because I'm inspired by it. There's no other reason to do it except for the fact that I want to, because I hear it as songs, you know. It's fun.
Well, that's gonna be a lot of fun I love the way that When the Stars Go Out came out. And if that's any sign of where it's going to go, I think people should be very excited about it. It's great. It's really, really cool.
Each one's different. None of them are like that one. Yeah. But yeah, it's along those lines, kind of Beatlesy, and, you know, a lot of the influences we have. But the cool thing is that, you know, you write music different than I do. So it gives me a chance to, you know, write melodies and lyrics to something different than I would write musically. Because I grew up like 90% of the time of my life as not a lead singer and not the lyricist, you know, but like as a keyboard player and a backing vocalist. So, you know, and now to be like not even the keyboard player on the record, but like just the vocalist and the lyricist is a fun challenge.
But it's always fun to get thrown into a position that you wouldn't be comfortable with normally. You know, it's really cool sometimes. Like, I've produced people where I haven't played a note on the record, and it's a lot of fun to help people out, you know, with sounds and ideas, and to be a contributor without having an instrument in your hands. But, you know, I read somewhere that like John Anderson had a knack of being able to sing over anything. And I love the fact that there's parts of like the Zebra Crossing song, which was the basis of When the Stars Go Out. You're singing stuff that I never envisioned vocals on. And it's great to hear, you know, that everything is melodic enough that you are able to turn it into a real song. And it's a great song. I mean, even if you take all the prog out, it's a great pop song. There's moments in that, in the Someday part, you know, where it's like chills, man, everywhere. It's just absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
Gorgeous.
Thank you. And by the way, a strange little tidbit, talking about, like, let's say singing without an instrument, I've only ever done it once. I think. And at least, or if not, if I've done it since, if this was the first time, and it was a very bold, scary first time to do it, but I had to do it. It was a great opportunity, but it was a weird situation where we were doing Cruise to the Edge, and and sadly, John Wetton had passed, and he's a hero for both myself and Fernando. And in fact, we were supposed to play in the late night with him and his wife, Lisa. But anyway, so we were going to do Afterglow with him, which would have been fun, a Genesis song. But anyway, he didn't make it to the cruise, sadly. And so we heard that they were going to do a tribute. And so we contacted Yes's management, who was putting that together, because they also managed him, and said, oh, if you're doing a tribute, Fernando and I, we would love to participate in it. And they said, well, it's not a musical tribute. It's just the guys that worked with him, Jeff Downs and Carl Palmer, and different people who worked with him, and Steve Howe, just talking about him. But you could still do it. You guys want to do it? And we're like, oh, we're the only ones performing?
Yeah.
Okay, sure, we will do it. And actually Tice Van Leer from Focus joined us on flute, and we had no rehearsal, and we did Book of Saturday, King Crimson song. Nice. And I just sang in front of those people.
The entire crowd.
What?
The backstage was incredible. I remember at one point, I think I was surrounded by Steve Howe, Steve Hackett, and who else? It was just like all the Steves were there, all the great, all the classic guys. And it's just like
all the Steves were there.
Oh, were they? Yeah, but it was incredible. But yeah, that was an amazing moment, and it was absolutely gorgeous. And we definitely made it was crazy being the only musical part of the tribute to John Wetton, which is huge.
And nobody knew, but like that being the first time I had ever just gone up to a mic and sang without like an instrument. I'm so, like I said, I blossomed from behind the keyboard. So for years I would hide behind the keys and just do my backing vocals. Then finally I was a front man in my own band where I played guitar and I was out front singing. That's one thing. But then to not have my crutch, not a keyboard or even a guitar, and just sing. And I did read the lyrics because it was like a spur of the moment thing that we were doing. I didn't know the lyrics by heart, but I didn't want to get them wrong. But still, in front of the people who knew him and worked with him and a bunch of my heroes, all I can say is this. Like, I felt like you did, where it was like an honor and we were lucky to be there and it was like a dream. But also, and not such a beautiful thing to pay tribute to John Wetton, who, let's say, to the other artists, they had worked with him. To us, we listened to him growing up, listening to him. Mm-hmm. So we looked up to him as a different kind of love. You know what I mean? Because I had met him. He actually watched I did a show where he sat in with District 97, Jonathan Chang and friends. So, and he'd watched Sound of Contact play, and he was so nice. It was great to meet him. Did you ever meet him?
Nope. Closest I got to meeting him was when I saw Asia at the Hollandale Beach Boulevard, at the Gulfstream Park. I didn't get to meet him, but I was not far from him backstage in the area, but I never got to meet him, and I would have loved to, because he's a huge...
You would have loved it. He was super nice.
Yeah.
Super nice.
I had my 10 minutes.
Yeah?
We played with UK at Nearfest. He had his Zon bass flown in, and we helped him unwrap it and all that. It was
cool.
No knobs on it or anything, and he was so proud of it. He's like, check it out. There's no knobs. In order to change the tone, you have to use an Allen wrench in the back and all this other stuff.
Wow.
And then he's like, and then I took him upstairs to watch Renaissance for. He's like, Andy's going to kill me if I don't come watch your set for a little while. And he had just flown in from like Japan or something, so he was toast.
But such a bummer, man.
Yeah, but he got it. Well, I mean, when it was showtime the next day, he was on it. Between that and the amazing coffee they have in the green room at Nearfest.
Nice.
It'll wake anybody up. But yeah, it's my little...
We love him. We love him. He was, and it was a real honor, and it was just, but again, for me, it was just kind of like, I felt, and I feel this way about certain things that you take on, actually, that are like a little bit bold for you. Like even the Shaming of the True show. I remember Brian McLeod was even just like, and that guy's played with like tons of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was like scared doing a show that with only 3 days rehearsal of that much work, and we had to learn so much. And I just remember like, okay, yeah, it's hard. And the Lamb, when we did the Lamb at Prog Fest, same thing. We had a week to learn it, and we had only run through the whole thing once. And it's just kind of like, yeah, but if you pull it off close enough to, not perfect, but let's say close enough for rock and roll, then you kind of graduate to another level. Not a prestige or that. I mean, like, of your own confidence or your own sort of sense of like, yeah, like, so like when I sang in front of all those people, in that situation, I wasn't nervous. I don't really get that nervous, but if I was ever going to be nervous, it would be like a situation like that where I'm like, oh my, wow, I've never done this. Most people at least would try this out, singing with a mic at like a high school or in a club, local club, not on Cruise to the Edge in front of like Asia and Yes, and like, paying tribute to their friend. It's like, if you screw this up, you're done. And so I didn't. We did it respectfully. Like Fernando said, it was a beautiful moment. And after I did that, I was like, all right, I can sing on a mic without a keyboard or a guitar. There you go. Done.
Yeah.
Plateau. Graduated.
I know what you mean. So what's next for you guys? You're working on a few tributes. You did the Yes tribute not too long ago.
That was fun.
Was that called Yesterday and Today?
Yeah.
Yep. A 50th anniversary tribute to Yes.
Yeah, where's a good place to pick that up at?
sonicelements.bandcamp.com.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And you could get physical copies through Cherry Red.
Okay.
And through Bandcamp.
Yeah, through Bandcamp as well. And that was a lot of fun. I mean, we got to work with some of our biggest heroes, we did a lot of the songs justice. I mean, I think everything came out really good, and there was some versions of songs that people are really, really digging it, where we took them to another place. So
yeah, how do you feel about that? Covers when it comes to verbatim reproduction versus doing it your own way?
I think that either respect the song and do it how it should be done, like authentically. Like the last thing you want to do is take it and use inferior sparkly belly sounds or something like that,
right?
Or like put a squeaky clean, modern guitar solo.
1989.
Yeah, like so. But I'm all for doing creative versions. I mean, the way I look at it is kind of like this. At least with Sonic Elements, because that's what that sort of umbrella is. This tribute projects that some I do with Fern, some I do on my own. And the approach is kind of like, well, let's get authentic musically, have a different singer, although sometimes the singer will be able to be pretty authentic, or it could even be one of the singers from the band. Like on the Yes record, we do have John Davison, for instance, on there a little bit. But like, have authentic elements, sonic elements, like Neil Peart on drums through his Sonic Reality library, or Jeff Downs played on Machine Messiah with us, who he co-wrote, and he played the keyboards on the original. So there's that authentic element. It's the guy and his own sounds and everything with us. But there's a twist. There's got to be some kind of twist. Otherwise, what's the point, Yeah. So we had Nick DiVirgilio sing that with Randy McStein. So it's the different vocalist is one twist. And then maybe there's an embellishment of some kind. Like this part is heavier than the original, or it's extended, or it's, usually some aspect of it is kind of like almost like a mashup or a remix or something like that. So, and then the other approach, which is always great, is when you give the song itself a creative twist, so it's not as authentic to the original, like Fernando did with some of the songs from the first Yes record. He kind of did a modernized version with the guys from the Lemon Twigs.
Yeah. Sweetness and Yesterday and Today. That was a lot of fun because, we were able to take those songs and make them bring out some of the elements that were lost in some of the early production that was very minimalist. And it was a lot of fun. I mean, you know, look, these are songs that have been part of our soundtrack for our entire lives. So we didn't want to, you know, modernize them for modernist sake. We just wanted to, you know, keep the songs going. And it's in some way, it's kind of like preserving its legacy. And now there's these new versions of these songs that are actually kind of obscure, and that's a lot of fun. You know, some of the more famous songs we didn't even touch, like Roundabout, Owner of a Lonely Heart, because, you know, who needs to hear another version of those songs? You know, they're heard every day on radio. If you listen to classic rock radio for an hour, it's guaranteed you're going to hear one of those songs.
Right.
So we definitely wanted this to be something that any true Yes fan would be excited about. You know, when they see the track listing and say, whoa, these guys didn't play it safe. You know, the hits aren't there, you know.
Some deep cuts. And then, you know, good casting. That's one of the things about the tribute records that we do. The casting makes sense. Do you have like Robert Barry doing the Trevor Rabin part on Changes and things like that? Or Tom Brislin. And the other thing is that doing keyboards with me. And we had Billy Sherwood, of course, doing bass, and he replaced Chris Squire and Yes. So, and Tony Kaye's on there. So we also like to, I mean, in that particular case, because we're friends with all those guys and we love those guys, it was a celebration of their music with them and Steve Hackett and some of their peers, Sonia Christina and Kurt, actually all of Kurt Dare's on does soon. And yet some of the next generation artists like myself and Fernando and other people our age joining. And it's like just one big, you know, party celebrating this music, and not just the music, but like things that we admire, like Eddie Offord, you know, like his sounds and production, and Rick Wakeman and just all, and Bruford, and just all these different elements that we love. So we're paying tribute not just to the songs, but to the sounds, to the engineering, to the, you know, all sorts of different things. And it depends on the song from song to song. The new one we're doing, well, actually just released, we're doing a Genesis tribute now that we're working on, but just released is a record that I co-produced with other people, David Fowler and a guitar player from the Australian Pink Floyd, and the McBroom Sisters, for the McBroom Sisters record called Black Floyd. And that's Pink Floyd songs, with the twist being it's female vocals. That they were the backing vocalists with Pink Floyd for many years. And on this, half the album is our Pink Floyd covers sung with female vocals by them. And then the other half are original songs, some of which they co-wrote with people from Pink Floyd like John Caron and Guy Pratt. I co-wrote one as well. So that was just released, and that's a big twist. But I also have another Pink Floyd tribute record I've been working on for a long time with male vocals, and a similar approach to the whole thing, where it's like, it sounds like we got hold of the masters or something, and we're doing some kind of, you know, singing along with the original multi-tracks and stuff, because we have Nick Mason and Alan Parsons involved and other people for that. So, you know, and then the Genesis one has been, I've got the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, which I've been working with Francis Dunnery, Nick DiVirgilio for a long time, the whole album, which Fernando's playing on. In fact, we're in the midst of doing that. And then Fernando and I are doing an additional 2 CDs of, like, similar to the approach of the Yesterday and Today. It's basically from 69 to 1983, like a few songs from each album. And I just, there's some secrets and there's some really interesting people involved. We can't reveal it all. But one thing I can tell you is Fernando did his treatment like he did with the first Yes record to some songs from Genesis to Revelation. You know, modernizing a couple really old Genesis songs, and it came out great. So
I've always loved those songs, but they're produced so safe. So it was fun to prog them up a little bit and to give them a whole new life, because, man, you know, Calling All Stations gets overlooked, but even more overlooked is Revelation, because people just listen to a couple songs and they cherry pick through it and go, this doesn't sound anything like Genesis. but the bones of it was there. I mean, there's some brilliant moments, but they didn't figure out their sound yet. But some of the songwriting is stellar. So it was a lot of fun to bring out some of those songs where they could be more accessible to the general Genesis Prog fan base. And I think they're going to be very blown away by how these songs sound with a little more guitar and drums and mellotrons and good stuff. You know, a lot of fun. It's going to be. I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited. Well, there's a question here from Mark Lewis. He said, "Do you guys think the downtime from the pandemic will make for more creative music?" I'll just
100%.
say it's the same for me. It's no different. The only thing that's different is that I have more time uninterrupted. I normally would have, like, let's say family or something going on that I would have to stop what I'm doing and go do it. I don't have to do that, so I can stay in the groove of what I'm doing more. But otherwise, for me, I bet it's the same for you. I mean, you know, it's just the way we normally work. We just work on music and always prolific and productive. You know, there's so many when you talk about irons in the fire, I'm working on a new and continuum album slowly. It's not been announced officially. That's my band. Fernando plays with that as well. Marco Miniman, Brandon Stein. It's like a super group thing.
Great
and
record.
Matt Dorsey, of course, and Gabriel Agudo and more. And then there's a new solo record, which Fern, most of the instruments are already played. I just got to sing and do the lyrics. There's the Squids Out to Sea album. There's several live albums and Blu-rays and different things. There's so much to do that it's like a mountain to climb. So, I mean, it's kind of like, well, the world can go crazy around me, and I'm in my little island in the studio just trying to get everything done, get it out there and get it off my, plate and out in the world. You know, some stuff people know about, some stuff people don't know about yet, but I know, and I'm excited about it. Like the concept albums and things that are just really cool that, but that's what we do. So for us, we're very fortunate, lucky that, because we do this for a living, that we're able to do that from home. Not every artist are. Like artists that music artists depend on from touring, I feel bad for, because they can't do that. And hopefully they write songs or they do sessions and they're able to like carry on working from home. The only thing I will say is that, and I'm a big proponent for this, I wish I had more power to change it, is that the valuing or the devaluing of the album from streaming companies needs to change, because especially when you see a situation like this where it's like, because they used to say, like a lot of artists, if I talk to artists and they say, well, the album is a lost leader, we lose money on that, but we make it up with t-shirts and ticket sales. It's like, well, not now you don't. And now you need to go back to this idea of like, why, should we allow the album to have no value? Buying albums is one of our favorite things, all of us, to do. It's fun to buy an album, discover it, and to support the artist and the whole system. And it's like
a novel. You don't want to just rip a chapter out and only go with that. You want the whole book.
Yeah, I mean, that's a single, but I mean, even just the idea of paying for it versus, let's say, paying $10 a month and just expecting everything to be free. The artists don't make any money off Spotify. It's a bit of a scam. It's a bit of a scam.
Didn't you see that news article this week where the founder or the president of Spotify is like, artists only need to make music every 3 or 4 years?
No. He said artists should not be making music every 3 or 4 years. You got to step it up and make more.
Oh, okay. Because we hardly pay you shit, so you better run a whole lot of music.
Yeah, basically, you to be able to make money in the industry, you have to be prolific. I agree, and one of the good things about the fact that the touring world has kind of stopped is that more records are going to be made, which is going to leave a bigger legacy. So the more records that are made, the more music that's released, the more stuff for people to discover. However, making money these days is so hard, especially with the fact that, look, okay, there's two sides to every coin. It's never been easier to get discovered as an unsigned, unknown artist. However, there's 5 times more artists in the world than there were back then. Because
honestly, that's not the problem. The
Yeah.
problem is the monetization and exposure, I suppose you could say, because even Facebook, you know, you even to reach, like, this is disgusting if you think about it, for a multi-billion-dollar company, for a music artist to reach their own audience of people who went out of their way to like their page, you have to pay. You have to pay to reach the people who already said they're fans on your page just to see it. So that's really like a bad robbery. It's really greedy. You know, they should make money off of corporations that have money to advertise and stuff, not the little guy. So that sucks. That'd be nice if, like, you know, you could actually reach your own audience. They could open those gates anytime, and they should during a pandemic. We should pressure them. We should get a whole bunch of people together. Anyway, there's that. And then, you know, the other thing I thought of, and it's really simple. All right. Spotify, the problem is simply they have a fixed rate, and it's like 0.003 of a penny.
Mm-hmm.
It sucks. It's so small. The only way you make money, the only people who make money are the Ed Sheerans and the Taylor Swifts, who have hundreds of millions of streams. Then it adds up to something. But the fact that it's a fixed stream means that the industry isn't scalable. It's only a moneymaker for either the top artists that stream the most, or the back end deals with the labels. That's where they make money. But that's why they turn a blind eye to it. But still, it's like, for it to be a viable business, all they'd have to do, I think, is they collect the $10 from people, and not everybody listens to Taylor Swift and this and that. If you're a prog person, you like progressive rock, maybe you only listen to Porcupine Tree all month or whatever, right? If they took that $10 and they just divided it by whatever that person listened to that month, you'd have a scalable business. You know, at least all the money of that $10 would go to progressive rock if that person was into progressive rock, or maybe just to the specific artist. If they only listened to one song of Fernando Perdomo's during that time, the whole $10 should go to Fernando Perdomo. It's a scalable thing, because you look at it like this. That $10 a month is replacing $10 they would used to spend on iTunes. It's now like, it's like, here's the 10, instead of getting $10 and then Apple would take their cut and you'd get $7, but instead of that $7, it's now, well, what did they consume? What did they listen to that month? Okay, well, let's take that $7 out of the 10. Spotify can keep 3, and the 7 gets split up by whoever they listen to. Hey, here's the money we collected. Here it is. Instead of, oh, here's the money we collected. We're going to keep this and pay you a fraction, you know, 0.003 of a penny every time they listen to your song. Since when is listening to your song worth 0.003 of a penny? And why would you let it be?
I know.
How many times can someone even listen to your song? How many times, if you think about, like, when you sell an album for someone buys Out to Sea or whatever, Zebra Crossing, how many times do they ever listen to it in their life? Maybe 50 times in their lifetime? Or, I mean, how many times can you listen to a record?
No, it's crazy. It's crazy. The original, I remember hearing about, like, the #1 video on MTV in 1982 was Rio by Duran Duran. And the entire year, the video was played maybe 10,000 times. And if you compare that to the 1 million streams that a new Taylor Swift song gets in the first 10 hours, it's crazy. It's really insane how many people are listening to music these days for free, and then how that kind of transfers to the money side. It's really weird.
I just did some math.
Yeah.
I just did some math. Okay, so for you to get the same $7 for your album, someone would have to stream it 2,333 times to reach $7 with 0.003. That's the math. That's not going to happen.
No.
So no one's going to get that. So they're going to do it 5 times. So 50 times, let's say. So 50 times 0.003, 15 cents.
Yeah.
Off of every person, basically, who listens to your album 50 times.
Absolutely insulting.
This is like, fuck you, Spotify. 15 cents for my album versus $7. $7 is okay. Apple kept $3. It's 30%. It's a lot, but it was a hell of a lot better than keeping 99%. I mean, it's a joke.
Have you guys got into monetization at YouTube any?
That's something that I'm gonna end up. That's one of my goals of my new YouTube page, is to try not to use any copyrighted material and end up getting monetized, because I know for a fact my friend RJ is no longer working even as a session guitar player, because all he does is YouTube videos. He does YouTube demos, YouTube guitar lessons, and that's his job, and he has a family. So, you know, that's really where the money is. I was watching some videos, like, if you're like an influencer and if you have like 100,000 subscribers, you could make between 3,000 and 5,000 a month just on YouTube.
Yes,
just doing YouTube videos.
I've seen it happen. My bass player does a lot of instructional ones, and he gets a lot of his monthly income just from the YouTube. You know, I mean, you have to hit a certain point before they even let you monetize. You have to have 1,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
You know, and I have hopes for that with this show, but I have about 200 subscribers right now, so it's going to be a long.
Well, I hope it happens, because, man, some people are making big money. Stevie T and Rick Beato and Davey 504 and the Do. There's all these kids. Man, it's incredible. Some of the musicians that are on YouTube, the numbers they get. I mean, Stevie T has not played a single show in his entire life, and he has 2 million subscribers. He has some type of stage fright issue. So all he does is he makes funny videos on YouTube. Like, you know, top 10 fake guitar players on the internet, top 10 worst guitar solos ever. And he'll like do redeeming things where he'll fix them, or he'll like, one of my favorite things is like, if somebody is faking the guitar, he will study their fingers and actually play what they were playing, and say, what if the guitar was plugged in? And it's actually hilarious. He's a comedian mostly, but man, he's got 2 million people that watch every video, and it's amazing. It's incredible. You know,
I think we all need some quick edits where we go.
Oh God, that's the worst.
I know. That. It's like, dude,
every other word is a different camera angle, and you know, the Davey 504 guy is the worst, because his entire accent is kind of fake, and he always like has these things where it's like he'll say something and it'll go to a quick edit of him crying, or like a quick edit of like him using some type of crazy word.
Hey man, whatever you have to do. Maybe you could go on there and just be like, with your fake accent, go, "Hello, it's Fernando Perdomo here."
Wow, you're the king of voices. You could do that. You could be the goofy Prog guy.
I don't want to be the goofy Prog guy. For money, it depends how much money.
The Prog Czar is here.
The Prog Czar.
The Prog Zealot.
Enlighten the
no. There's a guy online now. He calls himself Buff Carell, and he is a tone-deaf singer-dancer who has posted 1,200 videos of him singing karaoke. And all of his videos, by the way, the guy is like, he's a bodybuilder, and he's got like incredible rock hard abs and whatever. Like he looks like a G.I. Joe. He's a former army guy.
Like me.
And all of his videos is him in a mirror dancing and singing with a framed picture. With a framed picture. Dude, the guy has covered 3 out of 5 songs of A Court of Crimson King. He did Roundabout. He did Tom Sawyer.
I don't want to know this. This is TMI.
Every single one of his videos gets 100,000 views, 200,000 views. And here's the crazy part. Not a lot of dislikes, because people are rooting for him, because he's like 100%, 0% talent, 100% balls. And it's like, it's amazing.
That'll do it.
People commented in the beginning, like, dude, you can't sing. It didn't hurt him. It didn't hurt him, because
like most of us hate auto-tune, but this guy will make you beg for some.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, I
But
loved it yesterday. You posted that one on somewhere, and Jocko from King Crimson saw it. And he's like, "I'll get my coat."
Jocko's afraid of getting replaced now. But you know the thing is that, man, to see this like, you know, kind of hip hop R&B like dude dancing, popping and locking to the end of Court of the Crimson, sorry, the end of the 21st Century Schizoid Man, where it goes da 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 da, and he's like rap dancing. I mean, the guy is break dancing.
I haven't seen that. I got to check that.
No.
out.
No,
Don't do it. Huh? Okay.
you don't have to listen to his singing. Go to the end of his 21st Century Schizoid Man video, just to see him dance to the Freak Out. It's a beautiful thing.
Oh, really?
It's really good.
So the moral of the story is, if you're willing to make a fool out of yourself, then everyone wants to go see it. But if you're just, doing an honest, good musical effort, forget it. No one gives a shit.
Everybody
Sadly, it's the same mentality of the fail videos and America's Funniest Home Videos. It's like, to see somebody doing something right is boring. To see somebody do something absolutely stupid, like, man, there's videos that are viral just of bands failing, like people falling on stage, guitars falling apart.
That Pink Floyd.
If only I could get a guitar player to like rip his strings off of his guitar and throw it around.
But again, that's all people sometimes talk about me. They won't talk about the melodic guitar solos and great musicianship. But he threw his guitar and grabbed it by the guitar cable and blah blah blah. But sadly, it's like musicianship and performing skills sometimes is paramount to the great quality. Perfect example. We all love Close to the Edge. Those are 3 songs that are absolutely perfect and in the upper echelon of not just Yes, but music. But the worst thing is when it says, "Oh, you like Yes? I love that Owner of a Lonely Heart song. Oh, you love Genesis? I love the Invisible Touch song. Oh, you love King Crimson. I love that Elephant Talk song." It's like, it's really funny.
Well, that's not so bad.
Elephant Talk's great, but when I first heard it, I was just like, oh God, I thought it was slap bass. That's the thing.
You love Gentle Giant. Wait, who's Gentle Giant?
Oh, Gentle Giant, isn't that the guy that signed Bon Jovi? But that's the thing. It's like, it's the classic thing where you dumb down a band and everybody likes it, because that's just man, the fair weather fan of pop music is not going to be able to sit through Relayer. But something like Owner of a Lonely Heart, which has elements of what made Yes great, but in a 4/4 danceable, very catchy, very freaking catchy. And it's got, Chris Squire's classic bass sound and, John's big high voice and the harmonies and stuff. But let's just face it, it doesn't hold a candle to even Tormato to me. It's like, it's not even. Yeah.
It's way better than Tormato.
No. I will take release over.
It's tight. Tormato's a sloppy piece of shit.
Oh, there's some good stuff on there though.
It's okay. It's so poorly produced. It's so muddy. And
somebody said that the problem with Tormato is that they took out the rhythm. There's the John Anderson's acoustic guitar was taken out of the mix, and that was actually the fulcrum point of all the songs.
Going for the One sounds incredible. It's so clear and beautiful and just immaculate. And then, Tormato sounds like Amateur Hour on the recording. The quality is just low.
Silent Wings of Freedom is so damn good.
It's good.
That album, only Yes could have made it. It's something I kind of morbidly like about watching 70s prog bands grappling with the oncoming 80s. And the albums that come out of that are all rather unique.
Giant for a Day, the whole UK project. In the middle of that, talk about, England, Asia, London, 1978. People were going head first into punk, and punk was the anti-prog,
Right.
So it was interesting to see bands like like General Giant actually try writing punk songs. So you think you couldn't do it, and you know, Giant for a Day and stuff like that. And yes, I mean, there's a little bit of the punk influence on Drama. You know,
How about New Wave on
yeah.
Abacab?
Yeah,
Abacab's got a little bit of New Wave in there.
yeah.
And I'd say even
Cool.
King Crimson, you know, he bolted until 1981, but when he came back, it was like, well, you've been hanging out with the Talking Heads a lot, haven't you?
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
Well, they were super in tune with what was going on, and like, you know, one of the big things was like Peter Gabriel having fights with Jerry Murata about no cymbals. It's got to be all drums. Same thing happened with Discipline. There's barely cymbals. There's mostly drum bass. One of the like, as a drummer, immediately the best way to sound like Bill Bruford in 1981 is to grab the smallest tom you have, either a rototom or a concert tom, and use that as your hi-hat. And that's like the basis of a lot of those songs, like Neurotica, and it's like when you hear the drum track, it's very tribal, very African, very you know. It's really interesting to see how a band of 70s dinosaurs was able to, you know, have a second wind as this new wave prog band, you know. Because I mean, look, another thing is Adrian Belew's songwriting. That guy, well, when I first heard 80s Crimson, I didn't like it because I thought it sounded too like I don't like chorus on the guitars, and I thought that a lot of the guitar synthesizer stuff was whack. But then I found Adrian Belew's Inner Revolution record on cassette in a dollar bin, and that's when I found out that this guy is the real deal when it comes to songwriting. He's like a Beatle guy, he's like an ELO guy, he's like really into Roy Orbison and really into that stuff. And then Mate Kudasai, I mean, come on, that is one of the most beautiful songs ever in prog, you know. And if you take all the prog out of it and you just play it on acoustic guitar, it's a beautiful song. I mean, that's like, you know, that could be in a movie soundtrack, you know. But again, they were lucky because they were able to still capture some of that new wave audience. Like when they played on Fridays, you know, and did Elephant Talk and did Frame by Frame, man, that stuff is really modern and very cool.
And I think those are the best live versions I've ever seen of either one of those songs.
Oh yeah.
And there's so much, you know, happiness. You know, you watch footage from a couple tours later, and it's obvious that the honeymoon is over. You know, so.
But there's still brilliance on Three and a Perfect Pair.
Oh yeah, I mean, it didn't increase their writing ability. It just seemed like the chemistry was different.
Yeah, but then there's a lot of really bad '80s prog. I mean, stuff like stuff that these guys were just like, you know, a lot of the stuff that's very dance oriented, sample based, you know, kind of embarrassing. And it's just like, the problem is they wanted to get on MTV, you know, and I love the Asia record, but you know, it definitely was a surprise to have, you know, freaking Palmer, Wetton, Downs, and Howe make pop music, you know, mostly 4/4, you know, with repetitive choruses. They're the kings of like the one line chorus. Soul Survivor, Soul Survivor.
Oh yeah.
My favorite thing is, I wonder what the song title is.
Wildest Dreams.
Wildest
Dreams.
Was it what's the America one? So the voice of America, whoa, America. You know, they're catchy, but definitely not very prog when it comes to the choruses, especially. Oh yeah. But man, there's some great musicianship though. How
about I never forget, like when I heard. I mean, I like the first Asia record, but like Heat of the Moment, and then you see like the middle section, which has definitely some cool Jeff Downes stuff. Yeah. You know, but the guitar you hear diddling. Yeah. Like Steve Howe just going diddling. Like, wow, how did they get him to just restrain himself to just play a one note glissando, you know?
Yeah.
But it's perfect.
I still think that album and Drama, it's almost like that album is almost like what drama was leading to, I think.
Yeah,
Definitely, yeah.
but definitely
and-
having Jeff involved. I mean, his songwriting
Just the
is
way,
just
well,
so cool.
the dynamic between Jeff and Steve was so different than between Rick. You know, Rick was like a sparring partner for him to throw notes at. Like Tormato is a great example of like who could play the most notes on this record. And then you get the drama, and it's not like that at all. And everything Steve
Yeah.
plays is concise and just what the song needed, and it's still amazing over the top progressive rock guitar.
Yeah, but
there's
Jeff
no-
is
there's
see,
no
Jeff is a
noodling.
perfect middle ground between the Rick Wakeman school of prog and the Tony Banks school of prog, because Tony, even though man he could rip like that solo on what's the song from the Lamb where he's doing the tapping stuff, you know, it's amazing what he could do, but he plays the same solo every night. I mean, his parts are orchestrated. While Rick, you know, he could like play pentatonics on the mini moog all night and really shred like a guitar player. It was cool to see a Yes where Jeff Downes was definitely orchestrating the parts more than Rick.
Well, it's like some of these
Yeah.
guys are really great chordal players with rich harmonic vocabularies. Tony
Yeah.
Banks is a great example. Rick
Yeah,
Wakeman, not
nobody
so much.
did
You
did
know,
chords like Tony Banks. Tony Banks was the king of chord changes in rock.
I mean,
Yeah.
And I would say Jeff Downes, his strength was symphonic keyboard flavors.
Yeah.
He really like Drama and the first Asia album, you know, especially that particular 1980, early 80s, those are great keyboard sounds. And the way that he expanded this palette from just the basics, so by including the Fairlight and some other things, he and Trevor Horn, it just sounded great. It still sounds great to me today.
you're right.
Whereas, let's say, by
Very,
the mid 80s, when you started to have other digital keyboards, it got cheesier and cheesier in drum machines. You know, it started to just be like, you're losing the warmth. You're losing.
Well, a perfect
grit.
example is the GTR record, you know,
Yeah.
where things just got really shiny. Everything was shiny on that record, you know. And it
Jeff
just
produced that.
Yeah, Jeff produced it. And again, the band is called GTR. It's a combination of the two greatest, you know, arguably the two greatest prog guitar gods, you know, the Steves.
Yeah.
And you listen to it and you're like, where's the freaking guitar? It's really interesting, you know, how that record is so diluted.
I wanted the ultimate guitar record. I think everyone did. And shockingly, it wasn't. But you said the new Steve Howe record's good?
It's
You loving
great.
that?
It's great. Have you heard it, Sean?
yeah.
No, I
Well, I
haven't.
heard it. Yeah, I checked out a track last night. It's the one with that kind of. I call it a trollop. He has these trollopy little licks. And
Yeah.
then he double times the lick, and then he goes into a part that sounds like Surfing with the Alien or something.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Beginnings and the Steve Howe record, so I'm a little biased because I'm already used to what a Steve Howe record can be and what it hasn't been for the last 15 years. You know, he put out some really weak ones in the 90s that were just like, I didn't know what he was going for.
What did
You
you
know, he was
think
doing
of-
a lot of drum machine stuff and stuff like that.
Like Turbulence. Did you like
Turbulence, yeah, that one never did anything for me. Grand Scheme of Things was really good. I think
Turbulence was a little shaky.
that? Yeah.
Hey, but Grand Scheme
bumpy,
of Things,
yeah.
great. That's with Nick Beggs on bass and stick, and the shtick, and his son Dylan on drums, and Dylan plays on the new record. The thing about Steve is he sounds like he's having fun on this record, and that's something that a lot of people have trouble with Steve, because a lot of times he doesn't seem like he's having fun. In fact, a lot of times I've seen him with Yes where he's downright mad. You know, there's that famous video where he's yelling at the lighting tech, and he's like yelling at people that are filming and stuff. And Steve, man, on this record, there's a lot of joy, there's a lot of happiness, and
That's
I
cool.
feel like, yeah, it's great, and there's some great guitar playing. Man, he sounds. Well, one cool thing, and I wonder if Andre worked with him on this. His sounds are getting great again. For a while, his sounds were. I remember reading like he was using like a Korg A3 like from the 90s, plugged straight into the board. And now I feel like this record, there's sounds that are directly linked to the 70s Steve. And there's a lot of really cool stuff. And then another cool thing is Steve's bass playing. Steve played bass on all of Beginnings and most of Steve Howe record. And he's a badass. I mean, he's got his own thing. It's kind of, he could hear the influence of Chris, but it's not the Rickenbacker sound. It's more of like a funky, like flat wound sound with a pick. Mm-hmm. And he plays the hell out of the bass on the record. So, I mean, I love it. I'm really excited about Love Is. I think it's really good. And John Davison sings all the harmonies on it, and they sound great together.
Yeah, the one song I heard him singing on, I thought his voice sounded the most mature I'd heard it. You know what I mean?
Well, the problem is on Beginnings is that he didn't pick his keys very well. Yeah. He's a baritone, and I feel like he was straining on most of that record, and he was trying to make up with it by doubling his voice. So it definitely sounds a little odd, and you have to get used to it. But on this new one, he sounds pretty Gilmore-y on some of the stuff, and it's really good.
Yeah.
And whoever produced, I ordered the CD, so I can't wait to go through all the credits. But they did a good job with the production. It really sounds good, and there's some real emotion. That song "Love Is a River." There's some moments that gave me chills, and it's really good, really, really good.
Pretty cool. All right, well, we'll have to check that out then. That is Steve Howe's new solo album.
You should have Steve on your show.
I'm working on it. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
I mean, this seems like a great time to talk about that new record, and I would love to. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the sad things about Cruise to the Edge is that we were joking that it was going to be called Steve to the Edge, because Steve Howe, Steve Hackett, Steve Morse, Steve Hillage, and there was another Steve. There's so many Steves in Prague. I almost feel like changing my name to Steve Perdomo and Steve Kerzner.
I hear you, man. My brother's name is Steve, actually. It's the school. I call it the School of Steves, because they're just all such unique players. They don't sound like typical rock guys. They all usually are in bands that play really interesting music. Steve Lukather,
Steve Lukather was also going to be on the Cruise.
Steve Stevens, he's not just Billy Idol's bitch. He's a great guitar player. He's a flamenco guy. He's awesome. Have you ever heard those albums he did with Tony Levin and Terry Bozzio?
Yeah,
that's great.
Bozzio Levin Upper Extremities or something.
There's a few of them out there. I forget the names of them now, but yeah. So if their name's Steve, then it's probably going to be good.
Steve Stevens is guesting on our Genesis tribute.
Excellent.
Don't give it away.
That's one. That's just a surprise.
Oh yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, get him to do some nylon string, man. He's
a great flamenco player.
Yeah, he really is.
Yeah.
Well, listen, guys. We could keep this up all night, but I think we probably should wrap it up for now and get together again sometime soon.
It's always fun to be on your show, Sean. You're a great host.
Thank you.
You ask all the right questions.
Well, thank you, brother.
Have a great night, Sean.
All right, you guys.
Yeah, thank you, Sean.
Well, always a pleasure. You guys stay safe and keep rocking. See you, Kitty.
Yeah. Now he brings
the podcast.
Yeah, that's right.
That could have been our big viewership right there.
Well, he was sleeping. I didn't want to disturb him, but then he just came over and he's like, "All right."
See, the world is waiting for you.
That's your publicist right there. Chewy's your publicist.
That's right. Concept album coming.
Good night, y'all.
All right, you guys.
All right, take care, man.
All right, stay safe. I'll see y'all next week.